is E&P Reports, a vodcast from editor and publisher. Since 1884, the authoritative voice of news publishing. And this episode sponsored by IQ Audience Plus by Town News. Consumer revenue has never been more important. Digital leaders at media organizations worldwide understand the need to accelerate its growth now. Plus, traditional one-size-fits-all paywalls aren't the answer. They're blunt instruments that treat all visitors the same way. IQ Audience Plus is a smart, dynamic metering solution that empowers media companies to maximize revenue by identifying key audiences, seeding engagement, and growing membership and subscriptions. Supercharge your consumer revenue, grow engagement, and bolster your advertising income now with IQ Audience Plus. Visit townnews.com EP today to learn more. And hi, welcome. I'm Mike Blinder, publisher of E&P Magazine. Quick housekeeping, if you are listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, Stitcher, Deezer, Apple, Google, what have you, please follow us. Watching on our YouTube channel, smash that button below that says subscribe, hit the bell to the right. You'll get an update each and every time we upload a new episode of E&P Reports. I'm sure you've heard, everybody's talking about the Local Journalism Sustainability Act. E&P recently broke a great story. As a matter of fact, let me bring in my panel right now. Gretchen Peck joined me. Brett, would you come on in too as well? Brett Wesner. Gretchen, you did an amazing story for us on E&P about the folks in Oregon. Pamplin Media Group had the, I can't use the term I want to use. I'm going to use kahunta. How's that? to do a, Brett, is that a bad word? I don't, it's my show. I can do whatever I want. But I loved it. They were not the first to do a blank front page. We all know that Canadian newspapers did that. There was a small weekly, wasn't there, in Missouri, Brett, that did it once? And
I didn't hear that, but I would be delighted if they had.
But what a great idea to wake up your audience. And Gretchen, what did you learn from all that? I mean, what did you take away from that story?
Well, it was interesting because I talked to the guys at Pamplin at a time yesterday when the LJSA was actually out of the framework. So everybody was kind of panicking a little bit, how can we get this back in? And they decided to really take kind of a bold approach and publish the blank front page with a very simple question, what happens if local journalists are no longer here? And they were really hoping that it would inspire their readers to pick up the phone and call their legislators to try to advocate to get it back in. And within 24 hours, of course, it was back in the framework. Now, whether the guys at Pamplin
I don't want to give them
were
all
able to get that done, I don't know. But I think we've had some really great allies in Congress on this legislation as well.
Well, the way I see it right now is if I'm Joe Scarborough and you're Mika Brzezinski and this guy here is I don't know, Mike Barnett.
I can't wait to see who I am. But anyway, go ahead.
We have just started Morning Joe by talking about the Red Sox without even introducing our panel. So let me tell you who's here today. The female voice you just heard was Gretchen Peck, a contributing editor here at E&P, who's been really on top of the Local Journalism Sustainability Act, plus other stories that we're chasing. Brett Wesner. Brett, I don't know which hat you're representing today. You're chair of the National Newspaper Association. You're also CEO of a family group of newspapers in Texas and Oklahoma called Wesner Newspapers. Do I have that right?
Essentially, correct. Yes.
Right. And what other hats do you wear too in the industry, sir? Is that?
We actually have a bigger family business that has 27 newspapers in Nebraska, Kansas, as well as Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico. Okay. So there are a lot of irons and lots of fires. But my chairmanship of NNA has lasted 1 year so far. I have another year. And I've been so excited to be involved, especially in our government affairs, because as you know, NNA is the only association that has a full-time lobbyist for community journalism in DC. And MA, which is a very good friend of ours, also has full-time lobbying, of course. They tend to represent larger newspapers than the smaller community weeklies and small dailies that we represent. I actually have, my background was in DC on the Hill. So I have found that after having moved to newspapers, this role gives me an opportunity to kind of merge those two experiences and skill sets. So I've really gotten a kick out of it, even though it's taken quite a bit of my time. But I have very much enjoyed it. NNA's just such a great organization to work with and really gets a lot done, as I hope we'll be able to tell you about today.
Well, today we're going to be discussing advocacy, and we're going to be discussing because, you've been obviously, it's not just the Local Journalism Sustainability Act. You also are following a lot of things happening. But if I may, Gretchen, since you are definitely the smart one on this, and Brett, you're smarter than me as well, let me give a 3-minute overview to anybody who's in our audience right now who doesn't understand what this act is about. And you can tell me if I got it right or wrong. Sure. It was a brainchild, and I keep trying to tell him, Francis Wick, and he keeps saying, no, it wasn't just me. But the truth is, I have him on record on this very platform on E&P Reports saying, I woke up on a Saturday morning and had a Jerry Maguire moment. I simply started typing a white paper. And he is, of course, chairman of WIC Communications. And he bounced it off his buddy, Alan Fisco, who is president of the Seattle Times. Now, through that, they both said this is a great idea. And what it basically was is offering tax credits to 3 separate sectors to help support local journalism. And that is give a tax credit, obviously, to the publisher who pays for someone to do local journalism, give a credit to the advertiser who supports it, and give a credit to the guy who's subscribing to it. So what they did is they wrote this bill and they bounced it off their 2 individual representatives, Ann Kirkpatrick from Arizona, who's a Democrat, Dan Newhouse is a Republican for Washington. And amazingly, they both instantly got on board and supported this legislation. Brett, do I have that correct?
You do.
That's it. On. It's just 3 tax credits being offered to help journalism survive. Gretchen, I find it amazing, because we're going to stay on LJSA for just a second here, that it got instant bipartisan support. I mean, I don't want to go back to a darker age with a different administration screaming the media's enemy of the people, but there's been just as much Democratic as Republican support on the Hill. Or Brett, you're nodding your head, so do you agree with that, right? It's getting it from both sides.
Exactly right. I think last year, the bill was introduced last year, as you know. It didn't pass last year, but working with Francis and others, we were able to get, I think, 81 co-sponsors in the House, 57 of which I think were Democrats and the rest Republicans. I mean, it was very widely supported on both sides of the aisle. The difference in Congress for, their community newspapers as they think of us, as opposed to thinking about larger metros, is that when they come to their town halls, they want us there covering what they're doing. They want us to let people know that they're going to be there, and we're friends with them. I mean, most small community newspaper publishers know their member of Congress personally. So they do look at community newspapers in a different way. And I do think that there was a sense that we needed some help. And of course, when Francis came up with this idea, we were in the midst of the pandemic. No one knew how that was going to play out in an industry that was already suffering. So yeah, it was exciting to have all this interest on the Hill from both sides of the aisle. Now, it goes beyond, I think, just them wanting to be covered. Maybe I'm too much of an optimist, or I'm too Pollyanna, but I think if I was in Congress, you work the Hill, don't you have a love of the Constitution, or supposed to, and understand that these very imperfect men a few hundred years ago wrote a perfect document where they put a final check to power in there? I mean, it's not just, looking at national government issues. I mean, in a small community, you want someone looking at the school board. Am I right? You want someone. Yeah, and if we don't exist, no one's there. Because you're not going to get major metros covering small towns anymore. It's just not going to happen. So, in a lot of the towns that we do business in, there's not even a radio station, much less a television station. So we really are the only game in town. And Mike, I'm sure you've seen the reports out of Forbes and other places about when you don't have a newspaper, bond rates increase. And, if there is nobody guarding the chicken house, the fox has free reign. So we do play an important role in the business of communities, and also in terms of creating community. I mean, in these small towns, if you don't have a binding element of some kind, you really do lose that sense of we're all in this together. And then that's when you start seeing, more and more partisan rancor. And so, yeah, we play an important role, both as kind of an oversight role, but also as binding community together. And so when those communities who lose newspapers really suffer.
So where are we at today? And Gretchen has questions she wants to ask you about other advocacy issues, I know, beyond this, but we're going to stay on LJSA again because it's hot right now. It somehow got put back in to the Build Back Better. We thought it
part of it.
Part of it got put. Okay, which part is back in? Where do we stand today? What the heck's going on? Gretchen, you first. What do you got? What's going on?
So it's my understanding, and I looked at Senator Ron Wyden sent over the latest language to me last night. So right now, what's in is the tax credits for newsrooms hiring. What's out are the incentives for advertisers and the subsidies for subscribers. So that is out of the legislation at this point.
Well, that's a third of a loaf.
Brett?
Brett, we got that right?
Yeah, no, that's right. We were a little disappointed that the ad tax credit was not included. We actually felt that would probably be more important for our members, because not only does it help the newspaper, but it also helps our community grow. And if you're giving tax credits for people to advertise, their business grows as well as does ours. I think there were concerns about the cost. And I know that many of our coalition members, as you know, we were a member of a coalition that was really fighting this. Many members felt strongly that it was the payroll tax credit that was the most important. And we're delighted, let me say, with the payroll tax credit. We think it's great. We're not going to leave the ad tax credit on the side of the road forever. But for today, yeah, gosh, if we could get that in, it's wonderful news.
I was wondering, Brett, if you felt that the way that Ann Kirkpatrick and Representative Newhouse were able to build that sort of bipartisan coalition in the House had to do with that advertising tax credit. Because to me, that seems like it really, as you mentioned, has broader appeal, if you will, for our communities and small businesses.
It's very likely. It wouldn't surprise me at all. And remember that the environment last year was very different than this year, because last year we were not tied to reconciliation. This year we're tied to reconciliation, which every Republican has made it clear they're not going to vote for. So it becomes more of a partisan question now. So it really, getting included in that is vital, because we need a pass now. But there was a happier time a year ago when we were not tied to reconciliation, when we could have these conversations on both sides of the aisle. And I do think there was a lot of interest in the ad tax credit, because it would help the local businesses as much as the local newspaper. And as I said, we're not going to leave that on the side of the road forever. We'll revisit it. It's just going to be, it's going to be tough after this year with elections coming up, and it's going to be a very rancorous period of time. But no, it's an important bill, and it was a great part of the bill. I'm sorry that it's not in here now, but in this business these days, if you can get one part of your bill in, you've done a good day's job.
All right, let's go back to pamphlet media just for a second. Gretchen, I loved your story. You were interviewing a company that has 30 separate community titles that surround the city of Oregon. Plus, they also have a bi-weekly in the centers. They timed it for a reason. Correct me if I'm wrong, Gretchen, because when you spoke to Garber and Monahan, the two executives there, they published on Thursday for a reason, because they knew that their congressmen were coming back to town.
Right.
Now, Andy, we're going to see this. So, is this the time? This is a critical week, Brett? Do you agree? I mean, this is it. Get on the phone.
Yeah,
scream. Put a blank page out. Go. You pick up.
Yeah, it's no mistake that Senator Wyden was in communication with Gretchen. I mean, obviously he was a target of that message, and yes, I think now is the time.
This week.
Now. The vote happened this morning. I don't know if you followed this morning's activities. It's fascinating. So this wasn't the vote on the actual bill, but the vote on rules. Mm-hmm. It was the longest held vote in congressional history this morning, because leadership really wanted this to pass this morning, and they held the vote out for hours and could not get the moderates to sign on until now. So their argument now is that they want to wait for the Joint Committee on Taxation to actually give a ruling on the expense. So they want to see that before they're willing to vote. But it was the longest vote held open in congressional history. I love that. So yeah, but it's nerve-wracking. This is obviously a very important bill to our industry. Our part, of course, is a tiny sliver of what's included in reconciliation, but obviously it's the one that we're most concerned about. So yeah, it's a little bit of a nail biting situation. Unfortunately, it's been a nail biter for 3 months. So I have no nails left.
All right. So publisher's note here, because this is a moving target. We are now recording this interview on Friday afternoon, November 5th, 2021, 3:14 p.m. Eastern Daylight Standard Time, where I said that correct, delisted, because that's switching this weekend as well. And on Monday morning, the 5th, 6th, 8th, this is going to be released. So that's why you just said yesterday, and that's why you're talking about today. And I want to say now, if you're listening to us, because we're releasing this first thing Monday morning, this week, because they're home. And can I add something, Brett? I was a lobbyist as well, but I was not like you working the Hill. I was the president of the Maine Broadcasting Association in the early 90s. So we had George Mitchell and we had Bill Cohen, two very powerful men. And George Mitchell was the Speaker of the House, right? Now, here it is. Remember, Maine is a small state. We only had 7 TV stations in the whole state, maybe about 100 radio stations. You know what I mean? And then the National Association of Broadcasters kept flying me into DC to meet with George, because he'd rather meet with someone local than the national lobbyist. And we were back then, Brett, I don't know if you're old enough to remember this, retransmission consent and must carry.
That's when I was on the Hill.
That was when you were on the Hill.
On the Hill during that period, yeah.
So I helped get that through, because the NAB kept bringing me in and saying, well, look, you're Maine, but I don't know what I'm doing. They would wind me up. They'd spend me whole day in their office telling me what to say. And then I'd go into that famous office, the one where the people were hiding under the desks, and sit. I have a picture of me with Mitchell. So what I'm saying is local rocks with these people. Brett, am I right? Scream that. They want to talk to us, the local press.
Absolutely. As I tell people, we're community publishers. We're lucky enough to have 1,700 paying dues members across the country, at least one in all 50 states. But we're not a wealthy organization. And as I tell everybody, introducing them to NNA, I say we don't have a lot of money, but we are very loud. If you have members, who own newspapers at almost every congressional district in the country, and many of them personally know they're members of Congress, that's where things get done. Now, yes, we do have representation on the Hill from 3 lobbying firms, in fact. But our real power is when we send out the flag and say, okay, pick up your phones. And members know that. Members have a great respect for NNA. We've been around since 1885, if you can imagine. And they know that we represent the kind of community journalism that they're still comfortable with. So people pick up our calls, and we can make a lot of them.
And there's still other organizations supporting this as well. We've got Dean Ridings at America's Newspapers, Dave Shavrin at the News Media Alliance, and the NAB. They got people there doing National Association of Broadcasters. They're pushing as well. They want those same credits for their own newsrooms as well, local newsrooms. So that's it. We just spent the first 15 minutes really focusing, hopefully, our audience on. And don't stop the podcast. Keep listening if you don't mind, because we're not done yet. But then as soon as this is over, pick up the phone, or God forbid, do something in your publication to tell your audience to do something today and contact, because this could survive. So my final question on LGSCA, Brett, is if you were an odds maker in Vegas, what are you giving it? May I ask? Is it going to make it or not?
60.
What, 60? You're 60. On the record. Okay, there's the pull quote, Gretchen. You got it.
I would like to be more optimistic, but as I said, we've been in this for 3 months now, and we're going to do everything we can to push it over the line. But as of today, I'm at 60. I do. Before we leave LJSA, I do want to give a shout out to Steve Waldman and his organization. So we've all been in a coalition called Rebuild Local News that Steve has been chairman of, and so all the folks that you mentioned are all part of that coalition. We've worked really well together as a group, and that's part of why this is in. And I'm so excited that our industry is working together. This has not been an industry where we've all jumped on things together. I'm feeling good right now that we're finally realizing. Yes, Gretchen, go ahead. Before we leave this topic, I'd be curious, Brett, what you think would be the most fruitful or productive symbolic gesture at this point that individual publishers can make outside of all of the hard work that you mentioned that the associations and other organizations are doing. We saw that with Pamplin. Have you seen any other publishers kind of taking that approach, or something otherwise? Lots of editorializing. But I still think that the most important thing that publishers can do is that one-on-one contact with members or their staff. And just, if you're a publisher and don't know you're a member of Congress, that's okay. Call his or her office, tell them who you are, and say that you need to speak to the staffer who's in charge of this issue.
Okay.
And that's extremely valuable. So it's still that one-on-one contact that I think today will make a difference, because the hard work of writing the thing is done. Now we've just got to, push it over the finish line.
Not that I want to do lobbying 101 here, Brett, but I remember when I was at the NAB, they stuck me in a room and played a video to me called Good and Bad Lobbying. And they showed some Texan or Southern walking in, and the staffer was there. I don't want to talk to you. I want to talk to your boss. And then they said, bad. Do not piss off the staffer.
Yeah. No, that's
not very good policy.
Not only on Capitol Hill, by the way. That's good advice for interacting with any organization.
That's true.
But yeah, be respectful. I mean, obviously,
but the staffers help drive a lot of this, right? They're the ones they're in the ear because there's so much legislation going down.
At the end of the day, they're the last person that member of Congress hears from. So
exactly.
Yeah, keep them happy.
All right, so quickly, because we got to wrap this up, Gretchen asked for some time as well to just bounce off other advocacy issues that you might just give us. What's going on, Gretchen?
Indeed. Yep. I would love to talk USPS with you, Brett, if I may, because I know you've given some testimony on some of the problems. And just this week, I was reading about two Illinois-based newspaper publishers who testified before a House subcommittee on this issue. And I'll quote one of them. Her name was Dorothy Level. And she told the subcommittee, quote, newspaper delivery outside the delivery offices where our mail is entered has been a problem for many years. In the past 18 months, it has reached a crisis point, and we are losing subscribers in droves. Is that a problem that you're seeing with your members across the country? And if so, do we have a level of transparency with the USPS that we understand sort of the origin of the problems we're facing so that we can offer, I don't know, some guidance, some lobbying effort to try to fix it?
Yeah, so there are a lot of issues involving the Postal Service. That's one of them, is delivery, especially outside of the county. So for most of our newspapers up until last year, delivery within the county was pretty reliable. Unfortunately, that has deteriorated so that even in county now we're having difficulties getting papers delivered on a timely basis. Out of county has been a disaster for years. And our general counsel, Tonda Rush, was able to convince the Postal Service to form a working committee that she's on to address this very issue. And we've taken a few example newspapers and said, okay, let's follow those papers as they leave the state and just see what happens to them. And so they literally are following them from office to office to see what happens to them. And we're finding out some of the problems and some of the reasons that is happening. Most of all, they don't want to send out a packet to California if they don't have, at least 50 pieces. So, they're waiting until they have. So that's part of the problem. But also USPS, I have to say, has been very willing to work with us on this issue. So it's a disaster and it's got to get fixed. And especially the in-county delivery, there's no reason for it. It's got to get fixed. Our delivery is a problem not only for our newspapers, but also for our small business activities. I mean, I've been doing this for 33 years, and you start to develop a sense of the rhythm of how your business operation is going to work, how your cash flow is going to work. Well, that's just been thrown out the window in the last 6 months. So it takes forever for our bills to get delivered to our customers. It takes forever for their payments to get back to us. And just as a small business person, that creates problems. So that's not just a newspaper problem. That's an everybody problem.
And that's not being solved in the very near future, is it, Brett, at this time? What can we do as an industry in some way, shape, form? I'm sorry, did I get your question, Gretchen? I didn't.
Yes, absolutely. No, that's exactly what I know.
Yeah.
I'd like to know, where do we go from here?
Yeah, so there are a few things we're working on. One is Medicare integration. I won't get too far into the weeds on this because it's sort of complicated, but we have finally gotten agreement with the Postal Service and the unions to integrate Medicare into the retirement system of the U.S. Postal Service. The Postal Service had been paying Medicare all along, but many of their retirees were choosing private health plans. So that will save the Postal Service a lot of money and put a lot less pressure on, hopefully, on raising prices. Because one of the big problems we face now is just that we have increasing prices, strongly increasing prices with declining service. So, I sort of make the joke, they're charging us more and more for less and less until they're going to charges everything for nothing, and then they're going to become FedEx. I mean, because they're so obsessed with package delivery that I think the rest of us who are paying the bills are getting squeezed out. And let me say that I don't personally blame Postmaster General DeJoy for this. I blame Congress, because if you're serious about universal service, which members of Congress should be serious about universal service, they should take responsibility for making sure that the postal system is adequately funded. This should not be a let's drive everybody out of business and then figure it out later.
Gretchen, I get yelled at because people tell me my podcasts go too long.
Okay.
So you got one more question, one more advocacy issue.
All right, this is kind of a fun question. I've been reporting on publishing and news specifically for about 25 years now. And I know firsthand that we're not great in newspapers at sort of tooting our own horn, if you will.
Right.
And that's largely because of the nature of our job. We tell other people's stories, and we're not great at telling our own story. And I was reading how the Washington Post recently started a brand campaign and even had a primetime television ad recently, which I haven't yet seen, but I understand it's pretty compelling. Right. Should we across the industry, Brett, be thinking about our branding and tooting our own horn, if you will?
Absolutely. And this has been a problem in the industry that, we're shy because we think what we do is important and we don't want to treat it like some kind of marketing gimmick.
Right.
So I think there's been hesitation about that. But listen, if we don't tell our story, no one else is going to. And one of the things that we've begun focusing on this month, actually, that will continue all of next year, is an effort to tell our story to federal agencies. Because what we're finding is that federal agencies are spending a lot of advertising dollars in ways that do not reach community newspapers. And we're trying to figure out why. Okay. We've had several great meetings on this issue. And I think that there's an education aspect to this, that community newspapers are out there, that, we're the right kind of eyes for federal advertising dollars. And I think that there's an education standpoint of, we're out there and we can help you do this work. And so we've committed at NNA to making this a project for the entire year. And I hope we have some success with that. I was so offended that we, had this We Can Do It vaccination campaign, and not a single community weekly in the United States got an ad out of that, at least that I can find. Hopefully someone will call me and say, well, you're wrong, I got one. But I haven't done a single community weekly that got an ad from that. And we're the right kind of folks to reach those eyes. So
absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you, Brett. Thank you, Gretchen. And once again, this is a critical time for us to get out there, be active. Let's let our readers know, and any way we can, how important local journalism is, so we can brand ourselves better. And then let's lobby. Let's see what we can do to get Brett's morning line from 60% to maybe 65.
Okay, I'm going to revise that to 70. I'm feeling better just from our conversation.
All right.
Thanks so much to both of you. Everyone stay well, and please stay on our website, subscribe. We'll keep you up to date as this moving, changing target it's just so important. We'll just make sure we are constantly reporting on this. Brett, Gretchen, thanks for your time.
Thanks.